Well, hello everyone, and welcome in once again to a Saturday night here at the Six Screens. Well, we have got a number of programs coming up tonight. I'm sure you will like them all. We've got Linda James, a pasta babe. She's your favorite apostate, as she says, and she'll be coming on here very, very shortly. And after Linda's program, Touched by the Tentacles of the Watchtower, she's actually filling in for Anne Marie tonight. Anne Marie couldn't make it, so Apostle Babe was nice enough to come in and fill in for Anne Marie. But at 7 o'clock, we do JW World News. You want to make sure you stay tuned for that. And then we have a brand new program starting at 9:30 tonight. Eric out of Tennessee, a former Jehovah's Witness, and Daniel out of Michigan. They've joined together. They're now bosom buddies, so to speak. So they got a program they're doing tonight, Awakening, after the Watchtower. So that comes on around 9:30. So let's bring a pasta babe on, and let's start the program, Touched by the Tentacles of the Watchtower. Hello, Linda.
Hi, Rick. How you doing?
Doing fine, thank you. So we're looking forward to the program tonight. Thank you for filling in for Anne Marie.
Sure, I'm happy to. Thank you.
Very good. Well, I'll kind of get out of the way here and let you do your thing.
Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Apostle Babe Linda James, your favorite apostate. Today, being November 18th, 2023, is also the anniversary, the 45th anniversary of the Jim Jones suicide massacre. This was something very huge in the history of the world of cults. And it's actually the event that term, don't drink the Kool-Aid, actually came from, because at the time of the suicide massacre, they drank, actually it was a Flavor Aid kind of drink, but it's much like you would call a Kleenex, of any brand, Kleenex, which is a brand. They called the drink, it developed into Kool-Aid, even though it wasn't Kool-Aid that they drank. By the way, Kool-Aid was so not happy when this whole thing went down. And from the time it's been related, don't drink the Kool-Aid. So it was a Flavor Aid, and they put poisons in it. But another thing that had happened that people might not know is that this was something rehearsed like for 10 years. The motions of going through this event. So the day that Jim Jones called upon the members to do this suicide, it was considered a revolutionary suicide. He was quite the peculiar child. His father served in the war and was injured, so he could not work. So his mother worked. So with his mother working and his father deeply affected by the war he was involved in, presently there, but really not there for Jim Jones as a child, he was pretty much abandoned, even though his dad was kind of around or not around or doing whatever he was doing. He was known as being very peculiar from those that knew him. He used to, the friends he did know, he would have funerals for dead animals. How they became dead is questionary. It's questionable, rather. Maybe they died naturally, but I tend to think he might have encouraged some of the deaths of these animals. And he would perform these little funerals and expect his little buddies to be there with him as he played the preacher who gave the eulogy for these animals. And that was something that he expected his, little friends to stay there for the whole ceremony. And he was quite winded, he went on and on and on, and enjoyed that. As I was saying, he was pretty much abandoned. There was a lady down the way. who, if he went to her house, she was an older gal. If he went to her house, she would feed him. And she used to watch Christian television, much like people might be familiar with Trinity Broadcasting System, or Christian channels where you would hear different preachers preach. So it was something along the lines of that time. So he would get to sit in her lap, and she was very nurturing to him. So he did get a bit of nurturing, but it was accompanied with, God, the speaking of God, and what was on the TV. I'm going to read a little bit of what the Britannica has to say about Jim Jones. It's important to understand that anybody can join a cult. It's or a culture that's very high control, high demand. When we find ourselves being presented with something or someone that has the same kind of beliefs that we have or hopes that we have. For instance, before I start reading this, the idea of the community that Jim Jones created in Guyana, which was his last destination. What I read here in the Britannica will let you know the proceedings that went before he got to Guyana. It was an egalitarian culture, is what he was presenting. And that was very attractive. That was during the time of all these different things arising for equal rights, which he was all about. Matter of fact, his church was incredibly saturated with all these different cultures. And he ended up adopting a few different children of different nationalities. Matter of fact, he was the first white American that adopted an Afro-American boy child, and named him Jim Jones. So Jim Jones Jr. is an Afro-American person who I believe is still alive today. He and a few others of his siblings, Jim Jones, the child Jim Jones, who's now an adult, some of them were at a basketball tournament somewhere else on the day of the suicide massacre. So they were not there for that. So he is, in fact, a survivor, because he was not on location of where the compound was, where, Jim Jones's followers were. So let me just read here. Jim Jones was born on May 13th, 1931, in Indiana, U.S. He died on November 18th, 1978, and in Georgetown, Guyana. American cult leader who promised his followers a utopia in the jungles of South America after proclaiming himself Messiah of the People's Temple, a San Francisco-based evangelist group. He ultimately led his followers into a mass suicide. Let me just stop here. I've listened to one of the survivors who resided on Maui, and he was actually a police officer in Maui for like 20-something years after he survived Jonestown. What he shared to an audience was that what Jim Jones was teaching was apostolic socialism. I've looked it up. I'm not real clear on what that is, so I'm just putting that out there. Okay, back to what I'm reading here. He ultimately led his followers into a mass suicide, which left more than 900 dead and came to be known as the Jonestown Massacre. So now they call it massacre. That's interesting because, and I'm giving my opinion now. There was a time when I would look into this and it would be called suicide massacre, and now it's just down to massacre, which probably is very accurate. Going back to reading here. As a child, Jones became a regular churchgoer, and after graduating from Butler University, he decided to enter the ministry in the 1950s and 60s in Indianapolis, Indiana. Jones gained a reputation as a charismatic churchman who claimed to have psychic powers such as the ability to foretell the future and miraculously heal those who were sick. He was a vocal proponent of racial integration, a position that ran afoul of some church elders. In 1955, he established the Wings of Deliverance, a Pentecostal church that eventually became known as the People's Temple. During this time, he was noted for his work with the homeless, and in the early 1960s, he served as director of Indianapolis Human Rights Commission. Fearing nuclear war, Jones relocated the church to Northern California in 1965, first settling in Ukiah, then in San Francisco in 1971. So let me just break here. He used to show his members films of the atomic bomb going off. And at that time, this was a real, on the top of many people's minds, fear, understandable fear. So he would use that, just like the organization of the Watchtower uses fear to keep the members loyal. And it's actually considered a trauma bond. It sounds really strange, but the more people are traumatized, what ends up happening is they become more bonded with the person that does the traumatizing. So back to this reading. So that's what I believe he was doing to his members. Back to reading. Following the move, Jones, who adopted the name The Prophet, apparently became obsessed with exercise of power. Before long, he began to face various allegations, most notably that he was illegally diverting the income of cult members to his own use. This is actually, I'm taking a break here, I'm speaking for myself here. This is actually the case. He would have people sign over whatever income they had to the church. And he also set up situations to where he would help people get different services, help them sign up for different services that they didn't even half the time know that they qualified for. So, he was helping the people, yet eventually they had to hand it over to him, all of that money. Okay. So back to the article, most notably that he was illegally diverting the income of cult members to his own use. Amid the mounting accusations, Jones and hundreds of his followers immigrated to Guyana and set up an agricultural commune called Jonestown in 1977. As ruler of the sect, Jones classified passports and millions of dollars and manipulated his followers with threats of blackmail, beatings, and probable death. He also staged bizarre rehearsals of ritual mass suicide. So it's that rehearsal of the ritual mass suicides that I was talking about. Like they did these drills for 10 years before that day. So that's what they're talking about here. Staged the bizarre rehearsals of ritual mass suicides. So much like if any of you ever went to a public school, if we would have a fire drill, it's a drill. That doesn't mean there's a fire, but there would be certain times during the year that we would get a fire drill at school, and we had to go through this. This is what we're going to do if there is a fire, and we walk out calmly. These was part of the rehearsal, and we would go to a certain place in the on campus, either in the field or someplace on the campus. That's where we will end up if there is truly a fire. So that would be a fire drill. So he did this with the suicide drills. So people were familiar with how things would go, and they would happen spontaneously. And during these drills, people with children were taught to give this to the children first, and if they had elderly family members, to them first, and then themselves. So that was a drill. And when you've done a drill so many times, it's easy to walk through it because you've been conditioned to do that. It's a rehearsal. So there's that. I'm going to go to the next paragraph here. Back to the article. On November 14th, 1978, U.S. Representative Leo Ryan of California arrived in Ghana with a group of reporters and relatives of cultists to conduct an unofficial investigation of alleged abuses. 4 days later, as Ryan's party and 14 defectors from the cult prepared to leave from an airstrip near Jonestown, Jones ordered the group assassinated. However, only Ryan and 4 others, including 3 reporters, were killed. Fearing that those who had escaped might bring the authorities, Jones activated his suicide plan. Do you hear that? He was afraid of being revealed. So, like it says here, Jones, fearing that those who had escaped might bring in authorities, Jones activated his suicide plan. So this suicide plan that he had his followers do as a rehearsal all these years, he was actually going to do it for real then, on that day, because of his fear of the authorities. He was, in fact, abusing members and doing criminal activities. So he had a reason to be scared. So he was trying to stop the information from going back to back to California. So back to the article. Fearing that those who had escaped might bring in authorities, Jones activated his suicide plan. On November 18th, he commanded his followers to drink cyanide adulterated punch, in order that the vast majority of them passively and I can't pronounce that word, basically obeyed. Jones himself died of a gunshot wound in the head, possibly self-inflicted. Guyana's troops reached Jonestown the next day, and the death toll of the cultists was eventually placed at 913, this includes 304 who were murdered under the age of 18. So none of them passively committed suicide. They were all murdered. All of the children of this culture was murdered. Okay, anybody under 18 was considered a child. Some death tolls include the 5 people killed at the airstrip, bringing the total number of deaths to 918. That's talking about him. Then there's some things about cults, but I'm going to break away now and talk about one of the first things I had learned when doing my own investigations about the word narcissistic. Narcissism, or someone who's a narcissist. Basically, we all have a bit of narcissism to us, and if you consider it on a sliding scale, some of us have less than others, some of us have more than others, some of us are kind of in between. So the kind that have more than most, higher up on the scale of narcissism, tend to be very successful in politics, tend to be very successful in business owners, CEOs, and things like this, but also cult leaders are high on the narcissistic scale. So because of there's a theory that if a child between the age of, say, birth and maybe 7 or 8, if they didn't get a chance to bond with a caretaker or a parent, it's very likely for them to grow up and be high on the scale of narcissism. So that's a theory, okay? And I believe that that's what happened with him. So if a child between the age of birth and 5, 6, 7, does have a bond with a caretaker or a parent. They're going through their growth spurts, and eventually they're not clinging to their caretaker or parent. They're going off and discovering things more and more and more, but they keep coming back to the caretaker, and the caretaker reassures them. If they hurt their knee, or if they fell down or something, and they come back crying to the caretaker, and the caretaker tells them it's going to be okay, and gives them a hug and kisses the boot, kisses a little owie, and says things to them that helps them identify the experience that they're having. Oh, did you get hurt? Is that did you fall down? So they're now understanding what it's called that they're going through, and during this time, all of this bonding reassures them what's going on with them. So they're connecting to their body and understanding things. Sometimes a child might come to the parent and be very angry and tell the parents all about it. And the parent or caretaker can say something like, "Oh, are you angry?" So the child can think about that and say, "Yes, I am," and just go on and on about what happened, right? So things keep, it helps them understand what's going on with them and their body. This helps create a great sense of self. When someone in that time frame doesn't get that, they do not have a sense of self, and they will grow and still be somewhat infantile. So even though their body grows, and matures and shows, with the ages as they're growing, they don't have a good sense of self because of the lack of bonding with a caretaker or a parent. So the theory is those that don't bond with a caretaker tend to have the mindset that it's things outside of them that makes them who they are, rather than having a good sense of self and knowing who they are, if this makes sense. So if they marry a beautiful woman, she's more of a trophy wife or a accessory, because that helps that person, the narcissist, look like they're having a normal marriage, and that looks good to society. So it's about how they present themselves. It's about how they look, because they want to look normal. They want to be able to assimilate into society at large as normal, and they must be very successful. So the beautiful wife is confirmation of his success, confirmation of his manhood, things such as that. Whereas if it was a more, if this beautiful wife was married to a person that had a better sense of self, that might be a better marriage as far as their communication and how well they get along. Okay, so if you've ever heard the term, those with the most toys wins, that's kind of that mindset of, it's about what I have and I'm better than you because of what I have on the outside of me, not necessarily what is going on the inside of them, the sense of identity that they have developed in that process of growing up. The Watchtower makes sure that we do not gain a sense of self by making sure that we do not get to involve ourselves within extracurricular activities. If we want to pursue a hobby or maybe a talent that we have, that's usually spoken of as, that's usually an elder will tell the parent to get them out of that, and usually scare the parents that certain thing is going to take them right out of the truth. And as parents are taught, if their children do not grow up and become a baptized member and remain in the truth, they will not receive everlasting life and will be killed at Armageddon. So this is, the mindset of a Jehovah's Witness that's truly indoctrinated. So that truly scares the crap out of them. I believe that if we could pursue these things, it would help us develop our true identity, which is who we are inside. Some people's strengths are, being mathematically skilled. So other people's strengths might be, some form of sports, or somebody else's talent or strength might be entertainment or singing and things like that. We all have our different um, gifts and strengths that if we were allowed to pursue them, we would actually have a better sense of self-identity, who we truly are. So I believe the organization made sure we didn't get to find out who we truly are and kept giving us the pseudo personality of putting on the new personality, which I like to think of it as being like this one size fits all. And, let's be honest, when you find a garment that says one size fits all, it never fits all. But it fits most, okay? It fits most, but then there's those that it really doesn't fit well. I believe that within this culture of the organization, that there's a few that new personality works very well for them. But for the most part, most of the people within the organization, it doesn't. But they are taught that if it's not working, that there's something wrong with them. If they're not wearing it right or they're not doing something right. So there's a lot of self-condemnation going on. There must be something wrong with me. Jim Jones was also very influenced by a pastor named Divine. I can't remember his first name. Divine. Let me see if I can find it here in the article later on. I'm just going to scroll here because it talked about cult and then it went back to Jim Jones. Again, I'm in the Britannica under Jim Jones. Jonestown. Okay, so I'm going to read here about Jonestown. Jonestown, November 18th, 1978. Location of mass murder suicide. See how I was telling you that it was okay. I need not say more. Back to reading. Jonestown, November 18th, 1978. Location of mass murder suicide of members of the California-based People's Temple cult at the behest of their charismatic but paranoid leader, Jim Jones. In Jonestown Agricultural Commune, Guyana, the death toll exceeded 900, including some 300 who were age 17 and under, making the incident one of the largest mass deaths in American history. Jones opened his first church in the 1950s in Indianapolis. At the time, he was not affiliated with any particular denomination and had no theological training. His congregation was known for being racially integrated, which was particularly progressive at the time. Jones himself was white. In 1960, Jones' congregation, by then called the People's Temple, affiliated with the Disciples of Christ. And 4 years later, Jones was ordained in the church in the mid-1960s. He and his wife incorporated the People's Temple in California and settled outside of the town of Ukiah with some 100 followers. Believing that the move would protect them in the event of nuclear holocaust in 1970, Jones began holding services in San Francisco, and by 1972, he had opened another temple in Los Angeles. He began to make friends among politicians and the press in California and became a respected churchman. Thousands of followers, a large percentage of them were African American, flocked to him. Central to Jones' appeal were his displays of mind reading and faith healing. While the People's Temple was active in the humanitarian causes in its communities, Jones' treatment of his followers was often less than humane. Temple members were regularly humiliated, beaten, blackmailed, and many were coerced or brainwashed into signing over their possessions, including their homes, to the church. Black members and members of the other minority groups were convinced that if they left People's Temple, they would be rounded up into government-run concentration camps. Family members were kept apart and encouraged to inform on one another. Does this sound familiar? They were kept apart from each other and encouraged to inform on each other. So this is that culture of telling on each other and encouraging there to not be a real bond between family members. That was my opinion right there. Back to the article. In 1977, after members of the press began to ask questions about Jones' operation, he moved with several hundred of his followers to Jonestown, a compound that he had been building in Guyana for some 3 to 4 years. So he had people already over there. This is me talking. He had people already over there building this this area in Guyana, putting up little bungalows and stuff and setting up things. So it had already started being developed and made to be at this compound. So he needed to show up there before it was totally finished. Back to the article. A cable from the U.S. Embassy in Guyana to the U.S. Department of State in June 1978 terrorized the autonomy that Jones subsequently found in Guyana this way. During the consular visit, it has been observed that the local Guyanese administration exercises little or no control over Jonestown community, and that thus settlements autonomy seems virtually total. This is due to a variety of reasons, which include the fact that the area in question is remote, and thus the government's rather primitive administrative machinery. Okay, Machinery. Is that machinery? I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that. Okay, is already overstrained by its obligations to the Guyanese citizens living in the region, as well as an understandable disinterest on the part of the local officials to bother with an apparent self-sufficient community of non-Guyanese who obviously are not actively seeking any extensive content with the Guyanese environment in which their settlement is located. What we have, therefore, is a community of American citizens existing as if a self-contained, self-governing unit in a foreign land, and which, for all intents and purposes, is furnishing to the residents all of the community services such as civil administration, police and fire protection, education, healthcare, etc., normally provided by central government within this territory. So they're talking. This is true. They actually did have school there. There were teachers there that taught the children of these different grades. They did have all these different things set up. They had an area for if you needed to go to the doctor or stuff or see a nurse. It was very self-contained. And we see that also with Warwick, with the headquarters. They have their own fire department. So they have people there like hairdressers and doctors there. So they've got that sense of, they don't have to leave to get care. Okay, back to the article. In November 1978, U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan traveled to Guyana to inspect the People's Temple activities in the Jonestown compound. He was investigating rumors that some members of the cult were being held against their will, and that some were being subjected to physical and psychological abuse. After traveling to Guyana's capital, which is Georgetown, on November 14th, he arrived at Jonestown on November 17th. The following day, when Ryan was set to return home, several temple members who wanted to leave the compound boarded his delegation's truck in order to accompany him back to the United States. Other members attacked Ryan shortly before the vehicle left the compound. They tried to slice his neck. That's me talking right there. But he escaped unhurt. And the truck continued on with Ryan aboard. Temple members then launched an attack at the airstrip from which Ryan and his company, remember that they talked about he had people like a news crew and stuff, were to depart. 5 people, including Ryan and 3 members of the press, were shot and killed, and 11 others were wounded. In the wake of the shooting, Jones released radio orders for Temple members outside the compound to commit suicide. Shortly thereafter, Jones enacted his revolutionary suicide plan at the compound, which members had practiced in the past, in which a fruit drink was laced with cyanide and tranquilizers and sedatives. It was first squirted into the mouths of the babies and children via syringe, and then embedded by adult members. Jones himself died of a gunshot wound. Fewer than 100 people of the Temple members in Guyana survived the massacre. The majority of survivors either had defected the day or were in Georgetown. Officials later discovered a cache of firearms, hundreds of passports stacked together, and $500,000 in U.S. currency. Millions had reportedly been deposited in banks. I'm going to read that again. Millions more had reportedly been deposited in bank accounts overseas. The People's Temple effectively disbanded after the incident and declared bankruptcy at the end of 1978. So think of this. This is November 18th, 1978 that this occurred. So by the end of 1978, we're talking like a month and a half. They're bankrupt. So you have a little bit more of November and then the month of December. So by the end of 1978, they're already filing declared bankruptcy. Back to the article. Only one man, Temple member Larry Layden, was tried in the United States for his involvement in the November 18th events. He was found guilty of conspiracy and aided and abetted in the murder of Ryan and the attempted murder of U.S. Embassy officials Richard Dreier, and was sentenced to life in prison. Though he was released in 2002, another man, Charles Beekman, pled guilty to the attempted murder of a young girl and served a 5-year prison term in Guyana. This is the end of what I have in front of me to read. Patrick Ryan, let me make sure that's his name. The one that was put in jail for life. One man, Templeman, Larry Layden. Okay, Larry Layden. So back to what a narcissist is. I was talking about what is outside of them that makes them who they are. And when people are in their lives, they're looked upon more as possessions rather than friends, because they're really not able to have a sense of identity themselves, let alone empathize with others. It's just not a realm that they can function. They just don't identify with them. So I believe, this is my opinion, that these followers were considered his belongings, okay? During the time that Senator Ryan was there on the 17th, they that evening had a wonderful dinner, and they put on a show for him, and it was wonderful. I mean, there's film out there of that evening, and it was a really wonderful evening. And he even asked members, do you like it here? And they were like, oh yeah, we love it here. So At the end of the night, he said that, he talked to the group like, yeah, I came to check things out, but I can tell it's just, you all love it, and I think this place is awesome. The next day, one of the followers tried to give a note to Ryan, but didn't really know like which person was the person to get it to. Okay. Much like most people within isolated cultures, we don't know much about politics. So he ended up giving it to the wrong person. And it was like one of his crew people. And so he tried to slip him a note. It fell down. He picked it up and he says, "Here, you dropped something." Some kid went, "He just slipped him a note." So remember, there's that, report on each other. "He just slipped him a note," is some kid tells the, he screams it out, right? But within that note, he was asking to be able to leave the compound and go back with him. And Ryan did, Senator Ryan did offer this possibility that if anybody did want to go back with him, that they could. Okay. I believe that was the point too that really upset Jim Jones. These followers were his followers, and for somebody to come along and invite his followers, remember his possessions, because that's the way high control narcissist person thinks of these people. They belong to him. He wasn't having that, and it made him furious. You don't take things away from a narcissist that is a reflection of their identity. That's dangerous. So I believe that willingness to allow people to leave with him, even though that's the whole purpose he went there for, was to investigate the situation and see if there was in fact people being held against their will or didn't want to remain there. Jim Jones really looked at the situation, knew that even though all of those years when he would be in one location, he would go to another one, he was escaping different allegations that were said about him. He was running from the law often. That was often the case for why he would move from one location to another. Once they were in Guyana, there was just no other place they could go. So that was the end of the road in Jones's mind, is what I believe, and why I believe he verbally executed this suicide massacre. There were techniques and that the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses uses as well that Jim Jones used. It's that tell on each other thing. Also, they used forms of public humiliation, where when someone is disfellowshipped or disassociated, someone from the platform will go up there and make an announcement that so and so is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Back in the 80s, it would be said that so and so is disfellowshipped or whatever because of behavior and becoming of a Christian. So this was like the whole congregation heard this. This was public humiliation. And Jim Jones did this kind of thing too. He would catch wind of maybe somebody that did something against these rules. He would bring them up to the stage, condemn them for a while, ask them if they did in fact do it. And then what he would do is have his family members come up there, and he introduced corporal punishment. So rather than him doing the corporal punishment on these people going against the rules, he would have the family member do it. Okay, so corporal punishment, like boards to spank them. And so this public humiliation of being spanked or beaten on stage for bad behavior, this was a form of public humiliation. The organization of Jehovah's Witnesses, we were taught to self-isolate. In Guyana, they were truly isolated. And I'm wondering if there's anybody that's listening that might have recognized any of the other techniques or tactics that Jones used that reminds you of some of the techniques or tactics that the organization uses. And this really doesn't have to do with so much with doctrinal teachings, even though they might have a scripture to reinforce this technique or tactic. But I'm wondering if anybody does recognize anything, or if anybody has anything to add or any questions. I'm open for questions. I
Linda,
Hi.
Linda,
Hi, what
Linda.
is your name? Yes.
Hi, this is Stefan. How are you tonight?
Good. Hi, Stefan.
Hi. Linda, you're blowing my mind right now. You started off talking about, oh, I shouldn't say you started off, but when I tuned in, I got in here late, you were talking about how if you wanted to pursue a hobby as a young person, you basically, that would get beaten out of you. You told that the organization, if you've got time to go play basketball, you could be doing more in the organization. And I was just talking about that today. So that just blew my mind to start with. One thing, talking about this Jim Jones character, I don't know if you've ever heard of another cult leader who was strictly based in the United States. I want to say New York, but don't quote me on that. His name was Father Divine.
That's who I was thinking of. Oh my goodness! Yes. That was Jim Jones' mentor.
Yeah, and I was going to say because I read and heard online, and actually from a number of different sources, that Jim Jones actually went to Father Divine and used to study from him, basically, I guess, so that he could start his own cult, which he ultimately did. So that's another tie-in. And then to answer your question, I think another form of what made that group possibly attractive, which also is something that the Watchtower uses, and that is the intermingling and the acceptance of people from all different races. That was a major factor with Father Divine, and then, as I said, Jim Jones studied Father Divine, and that was a major thing in his cult too. So that's another one.
Absolutely. I mean, to be honest, I probably would have joined this cult. It was presented as just so progressive, and the idea was for it to be egalitarian, which is like where everybody was considered equal and had equal rights. This was attractive, to many people at that time. Thank you, Stefan. Or Stefan. Does anybody else have anything they want to add? I'm really glad he brought that up about Father Divine, because I mentioned him a few minutes ago, and I'm thinking, I got to find him in the article. But yes, all I could think of was Divine, and he just reminded me it was Father Divine. Yes, Father Divine was a mentor of his, and he did, he would go talk to him and study under him, and he was definitely a mentor to him as far as being a leader of a community.
Yeah, and that's why I always say, Linda, that these cults all pull from the same playbook.
Yes.
You see it right there. He goes to study Father Divine, then he goes to start his own cult where he essentially does the same thing. And then Jehovah's Witnesses are a cult. They all pull from the same playbook. They might not use every single play, but they use a lot of the same techniques and tactics.
That's exactly correct. Yes. So I believe the more techniques and tactics one is familiar with, it helps them not become involved in another one later on in life, or will try to avoid them. The fact is, this thing called cult hopping happens. It just does. And the reason this happens is because it's what we are familiar with, and it feels like home. So some of us grew up in very abusive families, and when they came across the organization, they had already been primed or groomed to be involved in a relationship, much like the one they grew up in, after they found themselves in the organization and dealt with abuse there. And I don't believe every single Jehovah's Witness had horrendous abuse, but many of the children were definitely susceptible to, a lot of, beatings and spankings. I mean, The kids would be taken back to the bathroom and be spanked, and we all heard this in the Kingdom Hall. We all heard this. So yeah, we grew up with um, corporal punishment. It was definitely encouraged, and not just children, but infants 3 months old. I've heard that elders have encouraged their parents to smack them on their little legs, to shut them up. Um, I don't think that happened in every congregation, but I have heard stories of that. Yes. Does anybody else have anything else to add?
I just wanted to say I'm a member of your cult, Linda.
Oh no, I don't want to be your guru, girlfriend. We're just friends, okay?
You did it. You did an excellent job with that. You asked about Jones and other similarities. When you mentioned apostolic socialism, I can see where that label would apply to the Watchtower, because they think if someone has a nickel, that they should get 4 cents of it. The pioneers seem to think that everything belongs communally, and I can see that applying to them. And also, Jones knew how to roll his voice. Now, he may have learned that from Father Divine, but sometimes if I listen to an old Watchtower sermon, I fall right to sleep. So I think that he knew the tricks of the trade, and I think Watchtower does too, and that's all I had to add, and I'm listening intently to your wonderful presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Pixie. That means so much to me. We are friends. I'm never going to be nobody's guru. No. But thank you. I appreciate the reason you said it, and I know it was a compliment. Thank you so much.
It was a little witty joke, but yeah. Both of us have followers if we want to, and neither of us do.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up about how you can see that, the apostolic socialism. You can see how it could qualify within things within the organization that we're acquainted with, and this Jim Jones and the People's Temple, living communally and, working the land, and that, different cultures that came together, different nationalities and stuff. I would have joined it, and I would have been proud to be a part of it, The higher someone becomes within an organization, if you think of it kind of like a cone or a triangle, the lower the members are, the less they know about what's really going on with the leadership. The higher up the cone or the triangle, you find out a few things, and the higher up you go, you find out many more things of the deceptions and secrets and manipulation tools that are used, that actually basically has the cult leader or the group of leaders having other people do their dirty work for them. And they will have other members do what is called a term called the flying monkeys. And that's a term taken from the movie The Wizard of Oz, when the Wicked Witch released her flying monkeys. And that's something that a narcissist will do when they try to get in touch with somebody that's ignoring them or they can't reach them. They'll send out a bunch of people to try to get in touch with that person, to try to get them to talk to them. Like, they are persistent, they do not do well with losing the possession of a person. That's how they think of other people, as a possession of theirs. Does anybody else see any similarities or have anything to add?
Directly. That they triangulate rather than going directly. That's very helpful. Well, I'm going to listen to the rest of it. Very good. And if you get a chance to ever listen to how Jones could use his voice, he had the preacher's gift. He must have learned it from Divine.
You know what? You're right. His voice is actually incredibly soothing. He has a very soothing voice and a very charismatic way of delivering it. It just flows, and it's da 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 and da 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 da. I mean, it's very flowing. And you talked about how you would listen to different things from the organization from years ago, and it puts us in this kind of relaxation, a bit of a hypnotic trance, which is more like a daydreaming state, not like being truly hypnotized by a hypnotizer. And when we become,
I think truly a trance state. I have to disagree. I think it truly is a trance state, and I think they've learned from the professional techniques. I'll go that far.
Okay. Yeah, that might be so.
Okay, thanks.
And I think that trance state is more like being in the way we experience it is kind of being in a daydreamy stage. Sometimes we can be like this when we're driving long distances. We just kind of, get in a kind of a trance. What happens when we're in that state is that we're less things and messages that will come into our brains, and they we more easily receive them when we're in that trance state than we would if we were more alert. So my belief is that
susceptibility to suggestion.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. See why I love you?
Okay, have a good night.
Good night, Miss Pixie. Appreciate you very much. Does anybody else have anything on their minds?
Hey, Linda, I was just thinking about what you guys just said. And, another thing I feel like goes on is you go to these meetings, and it's kind of like you sit there and you just kind of go on autopilot, where you're just physically sitting there, you're staring at the speaker, and as long as they are using Jehovah Witness lingo, your brain is probably just on an autopilot, and just maybe every minute or two kind of checks in for a couple seconds. Oh, yep, they used the familiar phrase. They said governing body. They said Jesus, and then your brain probably goes back on autopilot. And that's what we were doing at the meetings. I never noticed this. I think I mentioned this last week until I was giving a talk, and it was just a regular Thursday night, 5-minute talk, whatever it's called. And I looked out at the audience, and I was waiting for them to find whatever scripture we were going to read next. And I just looked at the faces and just saw how blank they were. That there just seemed to be no kind of mental cerebral activity. It was like everybody was just in a trance on autopilot. And I just, whoa, what is going on here? I think that was, if not my very last talk, my second to third to last talk. And that's when I really started picking up on what was going on. And I said, I can't be a part of this.
Yeah, I agree with you. And then there's some of us that would, maybe it's the same kind of thing, autopilot, or would kind of disassociate, and be, thinking other things rather than listening to the person on the platform. But I agree with you.
I think
Pixie,
we were. Yeah, I agree.
Go ahead. I missed what you said because I talked over you. I'm sorry.
Right.
Can you repeat that last part that you said a minute ago, please?
This is Stephen. I was just saying, when you were talking about the word disassociation, I said, yeah, that's what we were doing. We were disassociating our brains. Because you hear the same information over and over again. There's really nothing you need to really, process. I mean, this material is, 5th to 8th grade reading level comprehension. So you really don't need to be engaged. I think we're just sitting there, just like you said, we're in a trance, we're on autopilot, we're disassociated.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. I've made little videos about Jim Jones and his culture, and I'll be putting them on Facebook throughout the day, just little minute videos, and they'll be on my page for Linda James. Maybe I'll put them on Six Screens page too, but they're just little kind of things that bring awareness to Jim Jones and the People's Temple. Anybody can be deceived. And when you think of these people, he started off with one message, and it turned into something else later. And by that time, they had become more dependent upon him, which is what a cult leader wants to do. Bottom line, the purpose of a cult is to break apart the family and then replace it. That's why they call themselves brothers and sisters. And oh, you've lost your mom, we'll be your family now. Stuff like that, which could happen in other environments too. But these other environments don't necessarily strategically work on tearing apart your bond with your family and friends that are not members, which the Watchtower organization does. That's what I believe. How are we doing on time, Rick?
Yeah.
So Rick doesn't seem to be answering me, so it sounds like we can keep going for a few more minutes. Anybody else have anything on their mind, or did you have something more you wanted to say?
Linda?
Yes.
Hi, Linda. This is Constance. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you well, thank you.
Okay, dear. I was going to say, first of all, thank you for doing this topic. You know, as you know, and maybe perhaps other people know, I'm originally from the San Francisco Bay Area. I was born and raised there, and I remember specifically when this happened in 1978. It was huge, huge news. Everybody knew it was all on 2, 5, 7, 4, all the channels. And Jim Jones was, like you say, with the People's Temple. He was only about 20 minutes away from where I lived. And as far as Congressman Leo J. Ryan, well, because this whole story really hits home. Leo J. Ryan was a congressman for San Mateo County, which is the county I grew up in. And Jackie Spear was his assistant. She was 28 at the time, and it was a devastating experience. But what was interesting?
She survived, correct?
You think about, she did. She was shot 5 times on the airstrip in Guyana, and Leo J. Ryan was very close to her, and of course he was dead. And she survived, but she had to pretend like she was dead. I mean, even though she was shot 5 times, because what happened is this is what happened. Leo J. Ryan, the congressman, had 4 daughters, and one of his daughters got involved with the People's Temple. She'd been involved in some other religious group, but this time she was involved with the People's Temple. And so it's like the JWs. They totally isolate you from your own family. You don't have anything to do with anyone except people who are members of the same cult, same religious belief. Well, what ended up happening is that he knew it was quite risky to go over there, but it was his daughter. It was his own, but he had 4 girls. And so he had a group of people with him and some news media people. And one of the news person that he had with him also had a family member that was part of the People's Temple. And so anyway, they got over there. And so what ended up happening is, you know, he put a big front.
Just a moment, please.
You know, everything was peaches and cream. And then, like you said, Linda, when people slipped him a note, they were slipping him a note saying, you know, get us out of here. It is not what you think. So they got a few of those notes, he and Jackie Spear in the group. And what they were going to do is they were going to leave Guyana, and they only had 1 plane with them. Well, when they realized how many people really wanted to leave, he thought, my goodness, I'll take my daughter, I'll take the newsman's family member, and a few others, but that's all the plane can handle. So we'll get the hell out of here, and then what we'll do is we'll have other planes come in, or jets, whatever, and we'll come back. Well, what happened when Jim Jones found that out that day, he went into panic mode because he was mentally ill. I don't know if he was on drugs, but he was definitely mentally ill because he was experiencing hallucinations and paranoia. He was paranoid. So he thought, oh my God, we're out here in the jungle in Guyana, And now we've got this U.S. congressman coming out to check us out. And he went into full-blown panic mode. And so he told some of his guys, go out there on the tarmac and kill them so that they won't be able to take off and they won't be able to bring other planes back. So that's when Leo J. Ryan was killed, and a couple of other people, like you mentioned, and Jackie was shot 5 times. Well, what's interesting about this whole story, Linda, and like I said, I really appreciate you doing the show tonight, is, I mean, it was real close. I remember where I was when this happened, and I was a JW at the time, and I remember saying to myself, oh my word, you know, what happens if the governing body tells all the elders, it's passed down through the ranks, that we have to do something crazy. Like, you know, we need to end our lives, you know, to show our loyalty to the organization and to Jehovah God. And it just did not settle very well with me. And what was interesting comes even closer, okay, and I mean really close. When I left the organization in '83, there were no JW support groups. But like I said, I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. I was there 50 years, you know, half of a century. So I know the Bay Area very well. And what ended up happening was there was a sister named Kimberly Sherry. Some of you might know her. And she started an ex-JW group over in Marin County in the town called Larkspur. It's near San Rafael, San Anselmo, that whole area, Corte Madera. And we met once a month. Okay, so what's my point? So that group saved my life, but this is where it comes into the Jim Jones story. So Kimberly said to all of us, she said, well, I want to just let you know that, and she had that group for 9 years. She said, I just want to let you know that Leo J. Ryan, who was killed in Guyana on the airstrip, his daughter, now he had 4 girls, and I didn't know that. But his daughter is coming to San Francisco to a location, and she's going to talk to the public about cults. And all of you are invited at a certain time, certain date. It was just right off of Geary Street. And let me tell you, that was one occasion I was not about to miss. So we went there, and there was only a few of us. But anyway, she was very pretty. And she had explained that her father was Leo J. Ryan, the congressman, and she explained the traits of what a cult is all about, and you know, all the different bullet points. And as I was sitting there, Linda, it was exactly everything that Watchtower is. I mean, absolutely everything. Where they, you know, looking for a paradise earth, it's a utopia. We have this brotherhood, you know, it's going to be a better world. We're a community and a big family ourselves, isolated from your own blood relatives who are not part of the belief system. And afterwards, she probably spoke for like about an hour. And afterwards, I went right up to her and I introduced myself and I said, you know, I want to really thank you so much for coming out tonight. I said, I lost my father when I was 13, and I was very close to my father, so I said, I truly understand your pain. But I said, I'm also from San Mateo County, where your father, that was his district. So I just said, you know, thank you so much and for coming out and sharing all this information. And you know, that was her mission in life. She was probably, let's see, I was in my 30s at that time, and she was about the same age. And that was her mission, was to go around to different locations to really let people know how they could be. So, you know, everyone wants to be acknowledged. Everyone wants to be loved. Everyone wants to belong. Everybody wants to
needs a community.
Family.
Everyone needs community. Yes.
Like, exactly, honey. You get people like, you know, the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, or these other cults that are all around, and you know, people are very gullible and they don't really realize what's involved until they get in too deep. Now that's the first part. If you don't mind, I have another testimony. So my girlfriend Judy, Jude and I, we grew up, we were in the same congregation and everything. And she just sort of exited the JW. She got baptized, but she sort of faded away. That's all she did. She never got disfellowshipped or anything. I disassociated myself, but she was a real genuine friend. So even after I left the organization, she still loved on me, and we're friends to this day. Anyway, she lives in a town called Pacifica, and I had lived in South San Francisco, so they're just over the hill, and Pacifica's right along the Pacific Ocean. And she said to me, "Hey, Con," this was years ago. She said she had 2 twin boys, Ryan and Jeremy, and she says, "You'll never believe who I met today." And it was on a phone call. And I said, "I don't know, honey, who'd you meet?" She says, "Well, Jeremy and Ryan, they have sports and they're in soccer." And I said, "Well, good." She says, "Well, they have this friend that I met." And I said, "All right, well, tell me." And she says, he's a young man, and he happened to be African-American. And my boys, he was playing soccer. And then they introduced me to him. And she said, "Well, what is your name?" And he said, "Well, my name is Jim Jones Jr." And she was like a sister to me. She said to me, "Jim Jones Jr." She said, "Wow." She said, that's an unusual name. And she said, "The only Jim Jones I know was the one in Guyana with the People's Temple." And he said, "Yeah, that was my father." And Jude almost fell off her chair. She said, "What?" He says, "Yeah, that was my dad." And Jude said to him, "Now, wait a minute. How is this possible?" She says, "I don't understand. I thought everybody died in the compound, like 918 people." He said, "Well, that's really true." But she said, "So how did you survive?" He said, "Well, I love basketball, and I had a tournament that day, and my father said I could go on the tournament. So I was able to leave and play, in the tournament that was that day." And so she said, "Oh my gosh. So, this must have really affected you big time." He said, "Oh yeah, I lost my father. I lost my mother. I lost all my brothers and sisters. My whole entire family. I lost them all." So Jude said to me, she says, "Connie," she says, he's a really nice kid, and I said, "Oh my gosh, what a small world." Well, just a couple months after that, I happened to be home one day from work, and I turned on Oprah because I never got to watch her. And lo and behold, I didn't know it, but Oprah was interviewing Jim Jones Jr., this young man that Judy, her boys were friends with. And anyway, even Oprah had said, "How did that affect you?" He said, it was horrific because I lost absolutely everybody in my family. And had I not been going to that basketball game, he said, I would have been dead too. And I remember Oprah asked him, "Did you think your father had that capacity to kill so many people?" He said, No, I would have never thought that this would have been taking place because of my father. So anyway, it's a small world, and Linda, I just wanted to say I really want people to listen very carefully. If there's witnesses listening, there was something in the organization, somebody somewhere, maybe one of the governing body members said, if we happen to say something to the congregation that does not make any sense at all, don't question it, just do it. To that effect. Don't question it, just do it. And anyway, that's what happens. People isolate themselves. And then as far as the 918 people that are dead, they're in a big, gigantic cemetery in Oakland, California, which is just across the bay. You have the San Francisco Bay Bridge. One side's San Francisco and the other side's Oakland. And all the people from the People's Temple, all 918 people are buried in a grave there. And there's a big monument in honor of them. But a lot of them were right from San Mateo County where I grew up. So I just wanted to share that with you and wanted to say thank you very much.
Sure. And I just wanted to mention that today, many are gathering at that location that Constance just spoke of, where the bodies were taken and buried. And I also want to say that the daughter of Senator Ryan. Her and a few other people started they started a group called the Cult Education Network or something. I'm not sure if I have the name right. I wish I did have. I wish I did my homework on it. Anyways, she started that with a few other people, and because Scientology was spoken of derogatorily, or basically revealed the techniques and tactics they use and such, Scientology sued the crap out of them, and Scientology now owns that. So if you go to that, you're going to get good information. But if you make a phone call, the person that picks up is a Scientologist, and it's going to ask you, "Would you like a personality test?" Okay, so they now own it. Yes.
Well, Jackie Spear, she continued on to become a congresswoman for San Mateo County. And anyway, she's very pretty. I've actually seen her in person, and she's a very pretty woman. But she's no longer in politics. And anyway, it's just very interesting. This is not just something you read in the paper. It's people that really, really touch your life and so forth. And she goes to Congressman Ryan's grave every year. It's right in San Bruno, right across from Tan Fran Shopping Mall. It's called Golden Gate Cemetery, and that's where he is. And she goes there. I wouldn't be surprised if her was there today. And she has written a book with regards to Jonestown. It's not just all specifically about Jonestown. It's about her life and everything she's gone through in her life, all the tragedy, but how she's been very triumphant with regards to all of this. And that's one thing I would really like to say to people. You might have a lot of tragic things happen in your life, losing your family, losing a loved one in death, whatever the case might be. But we are not victims in life, not unless you make up your mind that that's how you want to agree. It all comes down to your mindset, and that you have control of. You can say, you know what, yes, this crap did happen to me, and it was horrific, and it wasn't fair, and it wasn't right. But you know what, you can overcome that, and you can build your life up in a very positive way. And my suggestion is take that tragedy and learn from it and turn it around and use it to be able to help other people. Now you're making a big difference. Now you're really making a big difference because you're not a victim. Now you're a victor. And there's a lot of other people that have had same situations or even worse happen to them. But if you have an attitude of love and helping one another and not playing that victim role, you can really go far in life. So I just wanted to say that to you, Linda.
Thank you, Constance. Yeah, there's a difference between a victim mentality and actually being a victim. And the Watchtower actually teaches us a victim mentality, where we just think that there's so much against us, why even bother trying? And oh, woe is me, and drama. But then there's true victims of certain situations. So there's a difference. And I would like to say, and I'm pretty sure my time's up, what I'd like to say as the last part of this program today is that, there's talk about the organization going down and people looking forward to the organization going down. And there is a concern that it could go down in the manner of, it's an understandable fear for us to wonder if it will go down much like Jim Jones and that murder massacre event. This is my opinion. They rebrand themselves over and over and over again. And my opinion is also that a perpetrator needs their victims much more than the victims have been made to believe that they need their perpetrator. The organization will be nothing without their members. Their members are their front. So getting rid of them isn't a good idea. You know what I'm saying? That thought of, could they all commit suicide? Possibly, but I tend to believe that the leadership needs the members as their front much more than they teach their members that they can't live without them. And I believe Rick is probably
in fact, Linda, Well, Linda, if you want to stay on, it's a very good program. You're doing a really good job. Well, why don't we keep it going for a little bit longer? As I do believe we have more people want to speak up. So let's keep it going for another 10 minutes or so and see what
Thank
happens.
you,
Okay.
Rick. And you know, as Constance was saying, you know, when you take a situation that you're in and you can turn it around, you can turn it around and use it for good. I believe that's the soul of the six screens, and what we as activists or anybody that shares what they've gone through is about. So yeah, who is this?
Hello?
Hi.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, thank you, Linda. This is Lutisha, the psychologist. I am also from the Bay Area, born in Oakland, raised in Berkeley. And I just want to say, when the people passed, it was like this pall over the entire Bay Area. It's very palpable in the air. And at that time, they were saying that a lot of the victims were actually grandmothers raising, you know, a second brood of children that made them very vulnerable, among other things. And also, who was involved with Jim Jones is actually Reverend Cecil Williams from Goliath Memorial Church, you know, who was, you know, a longtime activist with the homeless and stuff like that. So he had a lot of people like that in his pocket. But I want to point out something, that when we leave the country, you're really on your own. And at the time, there was a controversy about the United States did not want to pay for the shipping of the bodies back to the Bay Area. So, I mean, I could do a racial thing on that too. You really take your chances. And also, I want to bring up something that people don't know. I think the bodies were taken, I think, to Washington first, and the late Frances Cress Welsing, MD, who was a psychiatrist, she and other Black physicians wanted to sit in on the autopsies. They were disallowed. So, I mean, this is sort of like some of the hidden history that people need to know. Also, before I forget, I did read something recently about Father Divine, and that is that Jim Jones was so bold, he actually was trying to get Father Divine's followers to follow him, and he was chased twice by Mother Divine. So that's just a little bit of thumbnail history.
Yeah.
So that's all I have. So thank you for the program. It's sad, but it's part of our common history. I appreciate everything. Thank you.
Sure, and I appreciate you and your comment. I'm really, really loving this. And Jim Jones, that group had millions of dollars, and they made the church pay for the for moving the bodies. So that's who ended up paying for it. The Jim Jones, their money was used to pay for it.
Thank you. I didn't know that aspect, but I mean, at the time, the United States was waffling over paying for it. They did not want to do it. That's my understanding.
And that is understandable. You know, I'm troubled to hear that certain people could not be involved in the autopsies. That's troubling to hear, and thank you for sharing that.
They were disallowed. Yeah, but I'm saying that's like hidden history. I would know that because Frances Cress Welsing was in us. We knew each other. So that's how come I know that. You know. So thank you. I appreciate everything. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Linda, can I make one comment?
Sure. Absolutely. Go ahead.
Quickly, I know that we talk about Watchtower, and we couldn't envision them telling people to do a mass suicide like they did in Jonestown, Diana. But one thing we have to remember, Watchtower has already convinced these people that if they get into a medical emergency and they need blood to save their life, they have to turn it down. How many people have died already? I'm sure it's more than what died in Diana at one single time. But how many people have died already? I was with an individual earlier today who a sister that he was dating, just as past July 4th, essentially bled to death rather than take a blood transfusion to save her life from a minor cosmetic surgery that, in my opinion, she shouldn't have been having in the first place. And so this is what I think they have already gotten this into their mind. And his response to me on that was, well, she died because of her position on blood. And I said, excuse me, if she wasn't raised in that damn cult, she would have never had a position on the topic of blood, because you can't find any religion. I think there is one, but I think it has the same Joseph Millenarian roots. But outside of that, you can't find a religion that says the Bible teaches you can't take a blood transfusion when the Bible was talking about eating blood and not taking it. So from that perspective, they've already gotten these Jehovah's Witnesses to drink the Kool-Aid, as it were. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. There is a portion of the Moonies that are children of those that were involved in certain generations of mass weddings. Their offspring are considered having pure blood. So they're a small minority of that group are actually not allowed to have blood transfusions because they're this wonderful blood lineage kind of thing. And I don't know everything about it, but I was listening to a podcast of people that grew up in that culture of the Moonies talk about that. And I was quite surprised to hear this. I was like, what? Really? That was intriguing to find out. But yeah, for the most part, it is only the Jehovah's Witnesses. And we all had to have a blood card. That blood card is, in fact, giving the organization power of attorney over each Jehovah's Witness when it comes to the medical care of blood transfusions. Yes. Anybody else have anything to share?
Yeah, it's Dick Boyd.
Hi, Dick Borgie.
Just a few moments ago. How you doing? Kind of stole off my thunder. I just thought that there was a parallel between refusing blood and drinking the Kool-Aid. The result is death for either side. And another thing on Jones, he took the easy way out. He blew his head off, with 45, and that was an instant death. His followers suffered, excruciating pain before they died. And those little children, that's demonic. And there's a lot of those leaders out there. They're charismatic and have a great command of the language, and they will convince you over time that you should be following them right to the grave. And beyond the grave is paradise, and that's what they're selling, paradise. And in order to get the paradise, you got to go through these cult leaders. And I say there's a parallel between that and the governing body. They're sickos, those governing body. If you do a history of Jehovah's Witnesses, you will see all the false prophecies. At least 16 times they have said they know when Armageddon is coming. It didn't come in 75. Of course, they lied. Now they're saying that, well, I don't mean to block profit too much, but that they're saying that they never said 1975 is going to be Armageddon. And they know it's a lie. And they said just some brothers, spoke out of turn, and they don't say who those brothers are. But those of us who've been around, like I'm 75, and I was listening to Jehovah's rhetoric, Jehovah's Witness rhetoric in 1970 when I was still in the military. And I heard it every single time I went to the Kingdom Hall, which was a lot in the early 70s. Armageddon is coming in 75, be alive to 75. Well, all the cult leaders work the same way. They kill, they lie, they steal, and also a little more on Jones. He was a bisexual man, and he had a lot of different women lovers, same as David Koresh with the Waco folks on the Grand Savinia, they call them, and all these cult leaders. The one thing that's indicative of every single one of them is they have sex outside of their marriage, and they had a lot of it, and a lot of it's pretty kinky sex. Love your program. Thank you, Linda.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you very much for what you had to add.
Could I make a comment, Linda?
Is this our Dan? Yes, sir. Rick, do we have a few more minutes for Dan?
Let's,
And then
yeah,
that would be it.
let's run it. Let's go another, say, 5 minutes or so. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Rick. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in on what Rich said, Rich Borgie there. You know, I was thinking about this the other night. You know, there's people that lie, right? And, you know, you just say, oh, they're liars. Then there's people who believe their own lies. That's a little bit sicker. And then you've got the sickest of them all, those who believe their own shit and then demand everybody else believe their shit. And that's what Watchtower is. Watchtower has progressed from lying to believing their own lies and then demanding that you believe it. You know, when I was watching Steve and Les the other day, nobody dumber that you know, if you ever pick somebody, imagine, you know, I was thinking about this. You're the head guys in the Watchtower. And you said, you know, we got to go out there. We got to tell these people, you know, another false deadline. Well, you get the dumbest guy, amoral, unconscienceless, Stephen Lett. And you say, you know, hey, Jehovah's got a special assignment for you. Go out and tell the people it's the end again. It's, you know, it's the time of the end. And what does he do? It's the last days of the last days of the last. You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
This is what happens when you're so amoral and you could give a shit. I mean, can you imagine those guys watching him out there making a fool out of himself? We're in the last days of the last day. You know, you'd be like, wow. And then you'd be watching the people. Are they going to buy it? And the people are like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, Steve makes sense. And you're just going, oh my God, how much can these guys eat? How much shit can they shovel? I mean, you know what I'm saying? But I just thought that, isn't that weird? That's the progressiveness of sin nature. You lie, and I thought about that the other day. You lie, you believe your own lie, and then you demand. And now you're into kind of psychopathic kind of stuff, you know? And it's just down that road like Jim Jones. And Angela wanted to make a comment about the twin flames. You guys might have already talked about it. That cult that's going right now. It's called Escaping from Twin Flames. I don't know if you watched that on Netflix. You want to say something?
That's movie. Have you seen that series yet, Linda?
I have not. No.
No. So
No.
yeah, kind of the brand new thing right now. But it's a cult like these cults we're talking about, including Jehovah's Witnesses, including worldwide. But it's called the Twin Flames University. And they have just now moved to a new location in Michigan. So they're trying to, it's the way that it sounds to me, is setting up a compound just like exactly like, you know, Jim Jones tonight. He is controlling, and it's insane. People are trying to say, oh, it's just a health cult. Like, baloney. They've got so many people that are in this cult, and they abuse them verbally and make them feel like crap and mind, you know, F them. And it's just incredibly insane. But it's very, very large. Something like 30,000 people involved.
Yeah, they're telling the cult leaders are actually telling the people what gender they are, even if they're a woman. They say, "Well, we think you're a man," and they're getting sex changes. I mean, it's progressing. I guess what we're trying to say. But if you want exactly what Watchtower is doing, watch that Netflix, Escaping from Twin Flames. And yeah, and you'll see Watchtower. You'll see how they tell you, you know, 75 never happened. Nobody said 75. Nobody said that.
That gentleman that you met on Father's Day at the assembly never happened. You brought up all this stuff, never happened. He was gaslighting you, making you doubt your memory. And the fact is, that's exactly what they trained us to believe was going to happen. And then they blamed it on the members. This is gaslighting to make you doubt your own judgment and memory.
That's right. And when I was at the assembly, what was even more psychopathic was this elder. He looked totally normal, but his brains wasn't there. Yeah. Oh, that's the one you're mentioning. Oh, yeah. Yes. I mean, we went through it. I went through all the dates with him, 75, generation prophecy, overlapping. And he said, never happened. Never happened. What are you talking about? You know?
But you know, Linda, you know how people, you know, cult hop, you know? And I would not be surprised at all if there were Jehovah's Witnesses that ended up in that cult. I mean, who doesn't want a twin flame, right? You're lonely, You've lost everybody in the cult because they kicked you out of the Watchtower, so now you're alone. And it just seems so perfect. You're like, oh my gosh, they're going to cook me up. They promised that they will cook you up with your twin flame. So what happened was in the beginning, you could find a twin flame outside of the organization. But now, then they changed it to you've got to find a twin flame within the organization. And then they couldn't find it. So then they started saying, well, we've decided that you actually are masculine. And so we want you to cut your hair, change your name, and you're going to marry so-and-so. And then the white channel, see, so they figured out exactly what God is wanting, so that people trusted what they said as if coming from God, just like the Watchtower.
Yeah, and I want to add something to it. The guy took a look in the mirror. Now, this is governing body. The guy took a look in the mirror and says, I kind of look like Jesus. I kind of look like God. And they started calling him God. This is Watchtower. Watchtower, it's identical. It's identical. The spirit, the spirit that's in this guy and his wife is like looking at Watchtower. They say they're not spirit anointed, but they said Jehovah's appointed him over all his belongings.
It's just crazy. It's just crazy. And the control. I mean, you could even tell at certain times that he knew that he was just lying, making it up because he wants to make a lot of money. And then also they charged them a lot of money for their conferences, for their counseling. Then they started saying that everyone's got to work for the organization and that they want you to coach. So then they got, hopefully they can make a living coaching. And then all of a sudden one day it's like, you know what? You guys are all making a lot of money off of us. And each were saying, oh no, they're barely making it. So then he says, and since you're making so much, I want you to pay me 50% of everything that you earn. I mean, the guy is floating in every kind of thing you could ever dream of wanting. And if they wanted it, they bought it, including that big, massive property in Michigan. I mean, and they're just raping the people, just raping them every which way of money. And, pretty much saying that they have to do it. It's insane. Anyway, we marveled at the similarities between, Worldwide Church of God, which I got out of, you guys, the Watchtower, and so many other cult organizations, so much control and abuse and calling them, you stupid, whatever horrible things that you say, you liar, right where
there's a dehumanization process. Yes.
Say that again, Linda.
There is a dehumanization process where they make you feel less than human.
Yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. And so imagine 30,000 people. I don't know how many really were on those Zoom meetings, but it was a lot. And chastising them in front of everyone and saying,
yes, public shaming. That's horrible.
Yeah, and the mirror work is you're the fault. So if somebody has a twin flame and they break up and the guy's even dating another woman or man, they say, go do your mirror work, you failed. Tell yourself in the mirror, you're an idiot, you're a failure. And they're doing this in front of all these people.
Oh my
and
God.
These people are in their minds going, this is wrong.
I hope you show up on my show tonight and share a little bit more of it. My show that I'm going to have tonight, 9 p.m. Pacific time, on my channel called Apostle Babe Linda James. I would love for you to show up and share more, but I'm going to check that out. And I want to encourage people to learn about other groups that have been declared cults, simply for the purpose of finding the different techniques and tactics that the Watchtower used. There's a real freedom in that.
Yes, it's one. And what's beautiful, Linda, is it's side by side. From looking at another cult that acts identically like Jehovah's Witnesses, and you're going, whoa. And
right.
If anybody's on the fence, they're going to be set more free. It's a short series. It's just a 3 little series, about an hour apiece. And they will be set more free after watching it. They're going to go, oh my God, this is what I'm in right now. If people are on the fence, they're going to be off the fence.
And they separate you from your family.
Oh yeah.
Like heavy duty.
Right away.
Okay.
Family doesn't seem like they're on board. Get rid of them.
Yeah. Anyway, you gotta go.
You know what? I look forward to watching that. You said it's on Netflix. Twin Flames.
Yeah. Escaping Twin Flames.
Escaping Twin Flames. And I'd like to end the show. Rick's ready to start. I would like to end the show with reading Article 18 from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The organization goes to courts on a regular basis demanding this Article 18, which is freedom of religion, and they are entitled to it. But so are you, okay? And this is what it says. Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes the freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom either alone or in community with others and in public or private to manifest his religion or belief in teachings, practices, worship, and observance. In the middle of this, it tells us we have the human right to change our religion. That falls under freedom of religion. Please remember that is this Article 18 is from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and this is a right of yours. So thank you, Rick, for letting me fill in for Anne Marie. I appreciate you very much, and I'll be talking about this more tonight on my channel, Apostle Baby Linda James, at 9 p.m. Pacific time. Thank you so much, Rick.
Well, you're very welcome, Linda. Very, very good program. Lots of people listening in. So good. So that's wonderful. So she'll continue tonight on her YouTube channel. So we look forward to that. Thank you very much, Linda. We appreciate it. We will now be going to JW World News. And then after the news, we have Daniel from Michigan and Eric from Tennessee. They're both former Jehovah's Witnesses. They'll be coming on with their program, Awakening, after the Watchtower. That's tonight at 9:30. So join us then. All right. So anyways, we're going to go to the news right now. So we're going to end this stream right here. So stay with us. Don't go anywhere.